record this. Okay, I think it's recording now. Hello everyone. Hello YouTube. Today I'm going to be interviewing my good friend Achu Balasubramanian. Achu, introduce yourself. What's your name, your major in school?
Hey, so my name's Achu. I'm a computer science and math double major. I study at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, so WPI in Massachusetts. Yeah.
Very nice. So what company did you work for this summer and at which location?
This summer I worked at Kuebix. It's a company now owned by Trimble, and I worked in Maynard, Massachusetts, and based in their Maynard office, but remotely.
Very cool. So how did you get into this whole industry, and what's your role or position during your internship?
So in terms of the industry, I was kind of just looking for like software engineering positions because I am a CS major. And that was like the most available on the job market. So one thing that's interesting about these positions is that they don't all necessarily mean the same thing. Like what a software engineering intern does at one company is not necessarily the same as the other, but they all just like advertise it under this general like software engineering intern domain. So specific to my role in the company, I was mainly dealing with like production issues. So like debugging, issues that customers were having in real time, as opposed to like developing new features for later like use.
Gotcha. That's super cool. So talk to me with your application process. How many interview rounds there are? How did you prepare for each of them? What did you use, like Glassdoor website? How did you research? And is there any networking involved, or was it like a standard process where you apply it using the school portal?
Yeah, so this is actually a really funny story. So it's through the school portals, through Handshake, if you're familiar. So WPI has a Handshake. It connects us to a lot of local employers. That's where I found Kuebix. But initially when I had found Kuebix, it was a posting for a project manager position, like a TPM kind of deal. Mm-hmm. And I applied for that. I got a response from someone who works at Kuebix saying like, so let's check back in about 6 months and then pick up the conversation from there. 6 months later, I email him. I'm like, hey, what's good? And he basically tells me, all right, let's set up a phone interview. On the day of my phone interview, like maybe 5 minutes before it's about to happen, he emails me saying he's canceling the interview because he thought that this application was for the software engineering role, not for the project management role. And they had already filled the project management role. And then I emailed him back frantically saying that like, hey, I'm also interested in being a software engineer.
Good one.
check out my resume. And I got really lucky because they use a framework called AngularJS and Java as well, the programming language. And I happen to have both of those in my resume. So he looked at my resume and he was like, yeah, all right, let's do a phone interview tomorrow. So did a phone interview the next day. There were a few technical questions, not so much behavioral questions. So like, but they were more, kind of CS-based, knowledge theory-based, what's the runtime of like merge sort? What's the runtime of something else? Like something like that.
How did you prep for those questions? Was it just your classes or?
Yeah, definitely. So algorithms is one of the most useful classes I think any CS major takes. Algorithms and then also data structures. Mm-hmm. So those are two things you definitely want to review before every interview. Learn the runtimes, learn the different structures, like what their advantages, disadvantages are. And then we also have like software design principles, which you tend to learn later on, but those can be helpful too.
Gotcha. That's super cool. So what happens after the initial phone interview?
Really funny. So again, I answered the last question. He's like, okay, sounds good. And then instead of like him telling me like, we'll let you know if we're going to bring you to a on-site, he immediately just says like, all right, what's your availability for an on-site interview? So I guess there's no like filtering between those two rounds. Mm-hmm. Maybe they like to see on-site and phone as well before they make the decision. But I went to an on-site interview within the next week or so. This was like, I should contextualize. This all happened around like February 2020. This is happening like January, February 2020. So it's like really cold. It's like icy everywhere. I had to get my friend to drive me. But yeah, I made it there eventually. And then, we did the on-site interview. It was really interesting. Since it's a local company, there were a few WPI graduates that worked there, and like graduates from like local universities as well. And basically my interviews were like 4 mini interviews where they had 4 people come in and ask me like a question. One of the guys was the same guy that I had for the phone interview. And yeah, they each had their own question or questions depending on like what solutions you arrived at. So it seemed kind of laid back, but at the same time, it was like very conducive to, I think, making solutions. They would also help. So
was it a mix of behavioral, technical, or mainly technical and like case study, like scenarios type of questions?
It usually started off with like the technical aspect. So like they would ask like a series of like smaller technical questions, or like they'd be like, create an algorithm to do this. And then after that, like we get talking about more solutions, and then as the conversation becomes a little more informal, it goes to more behavioral parts.
Gotcha. Super cool. So now that you're done with the internship, what are your main takeaways from this whole internship, and what things would you advise the whole YouTube if they want to intern at a software engineering company, like what to do and what not to do?
Sure. So it's definitely okay to make mistakes. That was one of the scary things. I was like, to do any kind of work that's meaningful, you have to accept the fact that you will make mistakes, and those mistakes will sometimes show. Like when I accidentally pushed like a wrong, or like I pushed code that wasn't compiling because the errors didn't show up in like my IDE, and I didn't realize it didn't compile, which is super embarrassing. And that got pushed into the production for like one of the clients. And that broke their like system, or part of their interface, for like a good 3 hours before I realized what I had done and just quickly reset it back. That's the thing, you can't be afraid to make mistakes. And like after talking to my boss about it and stuff, like it was so chill. I think everyone at that company at some point has done like a fuck up, and y'all own it, which I think was really nice.
Yeah, that's good. Do you have any final suggestions to anyone that's applying to Kuebix, Tremble, or any software engineering company? Any help that you can give them?
I think overall, and this is a technique I'm going to use this year, but overall, I think for any software engineering position, like instead of just mass sending applications, you should look at each position you apply to. And this is something I didn't do last year, but I'm going to try and do this year. You should look at each position you're trying to apply to. Familiarize yourself with that company's tech stack, like know what they use, whether it's Java, JavaScript, Python, C++, what frameworks they use. So like, are they using like server-side Node.js, Angular, Django? And then figure out like how you can tailor your resume for that specific company so that it shows that you have experience with the things that are already in their tech stack. Because when those companies do like or 5 second or 1 second scan of your resume, like that's all they're looking for. And if you can show examples of that, that'd be great.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for your help, Achu. Appreciate it.
No worries, man.